Welcome to PowTech Virtual Talks on Digitalization. Here you can listen to the speech of Dr. Johannes Stemmer from BEUMER Maschinenfabrik GmbH und Co. KG. Empower yourself and join the talk. Have fun and enjoy.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Johannes. Thanks for participating here at PowTech. To be honest, it's the first PowTech where the trousers are optional. So that's also a new fact for me to be present in something like this. I would like to talk about disruption, and this headline here is meant to be it's better up to us before everybody else does it. And therefore, I would like to explain how BEUMER Group is going to somehow see the challenges of tomorrow, and how do we see ourselves, and where do we see the major strategic options, how to develop a rather engineering-driven company into a kind of digital leader. And therefore, maybe a few facts about BEUMER Group itself. BEUMER is a family-owned business founded in 1935. We are now led by the third generation of the family itself. We have a turnover around about 900 million euro and roughly 4,400, 4,500 employees worldwide. We have a strong global setup with more than 35 legal entities around the world. And what we do is basically we are in the intralogistics business. That means we are doing things in conveying and technology, for example, for cement plants. We are very active in the chemical industry for filling, palletizing, and packaging industry. We are active in logistics systems, so everything for the big warehouse and distribution centers in the e-commerce, for example, like Amazon or other huge e-commerce participants. We are active in airport systems, of course, heavily hit by Corona, but we take care about your luggage when you go to a certain journey. And we also have two other business segments, which are called tailor-made solutions for everything specific, and customer support organized in a matrix function to fulfill the complete organization in that manner. So this is how we are organized, and I would like to share our thoughts about digital transformation and how do we see challenging disruption options out there. And so the journey, at least the digital journey from BEUMER Group, started around about 4 years ago. And we talked about so-called unicorns. Of course, nowadays everybody knows what a unicorn is. It's a company which values more than 100 billion US dollars. And the question is simply, how can we participate in that kind of market? And back then we had a slide which looked like this, and it shows basically the date where those kind of companies are somehow hitting the barrier of the $1 billion evaluation. And of course, we know all the famous ones like Spotify, Airbnb, and the like. But back then, we have seen a lot of logos where we didn't have a clue of. So we had no clue what are these companies doing, what do they have in common to be so successful, and what does it mean for us being a rather engineering-driven company, and how can we somehow participate in this kind of software as a service environment, and what can we learn about the business models, what do they have in common, and why the hell are they so successful? Because what all these companies more or less have in common, that they are not very old, right? BEUMER Group is more than 85 years old, and these companies are maybe 5 to 10 years old, and still they have a quite incredible amount of value on the stock market. And that's the question, what can we learn, and what does it mean, and what is the impact for us in the mechanical engineering industry? And one of the first things we did back then is, so to say, to come up to a digital strategy. What does it mean? Of course, well, I'm just a little bit laughing, because normally what corporates do, they create a PowerPoint and try to merge all the buzzwords available and put it on one slide. And this was back then the result we did. And let me point out at least a few important headlines as I see it. First of all, we strongly believe that companies and OEMs, they need to have a digital agenda or a digital strategy. Where do we see ourselves in 5 to 10 years? Where do we want to develop? How can we shift? And how we can take the challenge of transition to the digital era we are all facing? And what really helps us in that manner is that the digital transformation is going to be a CEO topic. So everything we do is we are reporting this towards Christoph Bäumer, and this gives us a certain visibility among the market, and of course also a kind of warm wind in the back to really push some things and learn on the way how to deal with the challenges attached to digital transformation. And the most important thing here is subscribed as multipliers. These are colleagues among BEUMER Group which understand the value of digital services and digital transformation, and who, so to say, contribute from their respective business segment. Meaning that, for example, there are dedicated people in different business segments, and everybody is aware that the digital aspects are important. Either I'm working in the purchase department or in engineering or even in sales. It doesn't matter, because digital is relevant for all industries and all functions among the group. Therefore, we need to identify, so to say, a digital network inside the group to somehow infiltrate the group and reinvent ourselves from the inside. And it's not something you might do externally and say, okay, I'm just building the new BEUMER next to the old one. It's just the opposite. We need to integrate both perspectives and need to make the best out of it. And this is something we try to tackle within our digital transformation activities. And so organization-wise, we came up to this perspective here. So we divided the digital challenges into 3 different organizational pillars. One is the internal view. That means we are looking for internal projects to make ourselves internally better. And of course, SAP is one very big element inside this, simply to be internal as good as possible and make our processes as good as possible. In 2018, we launched the BEUMER Group Evolution. The BEUMER Group Evolution is, so to say, a software team in Dortmund, which is really focusing only on customer problems and trying to build MVPs around it and simply create more innovation towards our own R&D department. And everything we do in Dortmund is meant to be, in the end of the day, a BEUMER product. You can, for example, take the example that we would like to build an app next to a conveyor belt, or an OEE application next to a palletizer. All these things where we need to analyze data are forced by the end of the day. And on the other hand, you have seen the slide with the startups and all these platform ecosystems before. We launched the BEUMER GmbH. BEUMER is meant to be a company building concept, and I'm going to dive into some details later and might give you an idea how we try to reinvent ourselves also in this kind of scenarios here. So the biggest thing about digital transformation is communication itself. That means that or in other words, you can't communicate enough. So you need to infiltrate the multiplier, otherwise you're totally lost. And everything which enables you to push this is, so to say, somehow, you are hindering yourself if you're losing the organization. And therefore, you need to take into account that you have different types of colleagues. You have young, enthusiastic ones. You have maybe some more conservative ones. And you need to find answers to all of these. And therefore, it's really important that you have a good communication in place, that you explain towards your own company and towards your products, what does digital transformation mean? How are we going to tackle it? And what are the leading dimensions here? And this is why we all need to go along this journey. And it can't be something separate. It needs to be with the group, and we all are, so to say, sitting here in one boat in this manner. The BEUMER Group Evolution is meant to be somehow an extension of the software types. Very importantly, it's a non-profit orientated innovation unit that gives us a lot of freedom simply to test and trial things, where we also are allowed to fail here and there, but simply to come to conclusions as soon as possible and focus on new technologies and speed, and somehow trying to build digital products for BEUMER Group. And how you can see this. So if you try to tackle internal innovation, we said, okay, we need this function, and the basic criteria, or the basic milestone, so to say, is the customer itself. So in every sprint cycle, we are here in agile processes, and every sprint cycle is meant to be mirrored with the customer itself. That means if we have an app, for example, with a basic functionality, let's take, for example, an OEE application or any kind of dashboard for a specific BEUMER product. We mirror this after 3 weeks. We mirror this with the customer. We're going with 10 customers or maximum 10 customers in workshops to identify their requirements and then take these requirements back to the second sprint. And after at least 4 iterations, so 4 times 3 weeks in total, so 12 weeks, we come back with a more or less MVP product, which has a basic functionality and which simply can validate our hypothesis. Would a customer pay for it? How does it make sense? Can it create value? Do we see other features we haven't seen before? And these kind of things we find out if we somehow mirror it as early as possible with the customer base to have more evidence and to be more assured in what we should do and what we should proceed. Everything we build in Dortmund, as I said, is meant to be part of a BEUMER product, which creates certain customer value because the customer is standing in the middle of everything we do in this kind of perspective. On the other hand, just one slide back, we have the BEUMER GmbH. What is BEUMER doing? BEUMER is trying to find answers to those initiatives who are really different, who are really challenging ourselves, and who are, so to say, also potentially much better than things we are doing normally. And the question is, do we have the strength to build this internally, or do we also somehow need to evaluate these ideas in a kind of external environment? And this is what we try to do with the company building concept in BEUMER. And BEUMER is a company builder. That means we really think we have really fantastic B2B problems. And these problems we are pitching in front of founder teams. And together with founders, we are then launching companies which are only tackling this specific problem. And the major aspect is here that it's our job to somehow bring BEUMER's unfair advantage onto the table. That might be contact towards customers, that might be some sets of data, that might be 4,500 experts here among the group, and somehow to engage our network to contribute to this specific startup and to simply open doors. So beside the funding aspect, we try to open doors by utilizing the BEUMER Group unfair advantage. And this is something we try to do within the BEUMER environment. And the major idea is, while we try in Dortmund, we try to build 6 MVPs per year. So 6 prototypes per year is the KPI for the BEUMER Group evolution in Dortmund. And within BEUMER, our obligation is to launch 3 startups per year. And we already launched now 4 startups in the core business of BEUMER Group, which are simply tackling core BEUMER relevant problems, so to say. And so while we have on the left side, everything is going to be end up into a product. On the right side, if you see the BEUMER process, it's literally the same, but the major difference is here we would launch an own company to somehow reinvent ourselves and build ourselves a future digital portfolio of digital startups which can live on its own, but somehow extend the product portfolio and the value proposition of BEUMER Group in total. And the major question is, how are we trying, or what's our process to do so? How do we find good problems? How do we tackle them? And specifically also how to incentivize founders. As you might know, founders are basically incentivized over shares. This might be a conflict with family-owned businesses because they are basically also incentivized only about shares. And the question is, how do these two worlds fit together? And how can we find a balance between the shareholders' interest from BEUMER Group as well as the shareholders' interest from founders, which are incentivized? And so I'll come to that in a second. And the search areas are basically all our business segments, for example, the chemical industry. And if we see here something which is really worth solving, we start a so-called validation. And a good problem for us is, for example, if we see inefficient processes, it's definitely something where you not read on regular on newspaper. So it's basically something hidden, something which you might call a specific B2B problem. It potentially has a high business value, and of course, it has to be strategic relevant for us. This is our problem search, so to say. And then we have a filter, which says basically consists of 3 questions. Is it non-obvious? So are we maybe one of the very few who know about this problem? Can we utilize BEUMER Group's unfair advantage? So what can BEUMER Group contribute in order to solve it? And it's not money, right? It's rather customers, data, process insights, and these kind of things. And do we think now is the time to do so? And then we have a last filter in this validation process. Is it something where we think it wasn't possible 5 years ago? Is the market large enough? Do we think that a potential solution to solve this is 5 times better than the status quo? Can we defend this topic? And again, is it strategic relevant? And then we match this problem together with founders and they start a validation process. A validation process normally takes 3 months. And within these 3 months, they get a basic, small funding. We hire them for 3 months, and then it's their job to get this topic done and to somehow dive into the details and come up with a proper solution for this specific problems. On the way, they are having dozens of interviews. They need to create at least 5 LOIs from different customers who say, if you're going to build this, I would like to join. And this is something we try to tackle. And if this topic is good enough and the validation is well enough, then there will be a board pitch where we say, okay, let's build a startup together. And then we launch an own independent legal entity. And so by launching 3 startups per year, we are trying to somehow challenge ourselves with new startups which are part of the BEUMER family, but also to challenge us with new and maybe also disruptive ideas to come up with better solutions than the status quo. Last slide, knowing that I'm also running out of time and I would like to have a bit time to discuss. So there are dozens of strategic options how to disrupt yourself and how to somehow tackle digital challenges out there. So there's no blueprint how to deal with this. On the other hand, what is really valuable for us, and I personally think it's really necessary to topic. Otherwise, you're somehow stuck in the middle, as I see it. Within mechanical engineering, we definitely need to face digital competitions, specifically in service, for example, or data analytics. So there are a lot of startups out there which has no clue about intralogistics, but nevertheless, they are trying to engage our BEUMER Group market. So we need somehow also to defend ourselves and open up our eyes and somehow also analyze the potential digital competition out there. All these things can only fly, as I think, if we utilize our unfair advantages, meaning expertise, education level, data, and these kind of things. We can't solve all these things internally. I'm totally convinced that we also need to get help from outside. And last but not least, I think these things are dangerous in terms of we will fail here and there. And also there will be topics which are failing. But not to deal with this at all might be the even worse solution. So therefore, I strongly believe that we need to deal with this kind of challenges out there and need to find ways how every corporate and every OEM is trying to reinvent themselves and tackling digital new enterprises and somehow, be open and willing to challenge. We need to be willing to challenge ourselves with these kind of new stuff, which is happening there to be prepared for the next few decades to come. That is basically in very short time the major aspect how we see this, and I'm more than happy to discuss this and answer some questions to what the strategic relevance and the process we're tackling. Thanks so far for now.
I hope you can hear us now, Mr. Stemmer. Still not? So
unfortunately, yes, Frau Hempel, I have no clue. Well, digital sometimes is a challenge for everyone. So
definitely.
I just have the chance to read the chat. So
okay.
This is what Corona still is teaching us, that
we will just try to keep reacting to you.
That would be super.
The participants can ask their questions. We would be really glad.
So I'm open for all questions. Feel free.
Yes, and if you write the questions, we can easily, Mr. Stemmer can answer. At the moment, yes, perfect. There's the first question.
Yes. The one topic which is right now really specific is a pooling concept called Sparrow. So what we normally do is, if you have a customer, you normally sell local spare part kits. So in order to maintain your process, in order to keep your operation alive, we are selling a machine plus an additional spare part kit, maybe worth 100,000 euro, for example. And we do this for each and every customer. And for example, if you take logistics customers, you have a sortation and distribution center here on the right way on the highway. And on the left side, again, we have a Hermes and DHL hub, for example, 2 kilometers away from each other. Both have exactly the same equipment. Both have exactly the same spare parts. And what we try to come up with is a kind of digital pooling platform called Sparrow. So we try to virtually combine different spare parts in order to maintain more value and make customers or enable customers to share their spare parts, as well as OEMs, to have, so to say, a virtual pooling platform, which also gives some answers towards Corona and some supply chain issues, but trying to somehow mitigate this problem of spare parts availability by using digital technology. Simply collaborate in a virtual manner and share spare parts. And not everybody needs to have the own spare parts in the same amount of stock level and these kind of things. So we're just trying to build synergies here in a digital environment. I read it out loud. What do you think are the biggest challenges in shaping the digital change? What is particularly important? As I said, or as I tried to underline in the beginning, I think the most important thing is simply to, in the end, it's communication. Sounds really easy, but it's really hard because you have so many different perspectives. Some are fearing these kind of challenges. Other ones are totally thrilled about it and enthusiastic. And you need to find answers to everybody, right? Not everybody has the same level of matureness when it comes to digital business models and these kind of things. And I think we would lose so much if we are losing the organization because we need it. We need to combine this 80 years of experience plus the digital something which is ahead of us, and we need to focus on communication in order to make sure that the organization is behind us. Because of course, in the end of the day, first it costs money and it will pay out in the future, and therefore it's in also content and the contribution from the company itself.
Thank you.
The next question would be, where have you had external support? What must companies do alone on digital transformation? That's a really good question. I jumped to the second last slide here. There is no blueprint. So we have so many different opportunities to tackle this, either via an internal project team or via an external consulting group, which I don't think is the best option, by the way. And well, in the end of the day, we somehow looked how others did it. There are so many great examples which are not in your competitor landscape. If you look, for example, one of the very first one has been Klöckner Stahl. And as you might remember, we have seen the Klöckner Innovation and the Klöckner Venture, or the firma Fissmann boiler and heating systems. They really are advanced in how they see digital transformation and how Max Fissmann is trying to somehow reinvent his company. And what all those aspects or strategies have in common, more or less, most of them have something revolutionary, which is in our case, the BEUMER Group Involution. So build the app next to the conveyor belt, and so we have an evolutionary aspect and a revolutionary aspect. So somehow to challenge ourselves with the really fancy stuff, and which is totally different and potentially disruptive for our core business. And I think a pattern in all these methodologies is that they have this evolutionary aspect and the challenging aspect in common, and you need to do both, as I see it. Why Berlin? So the question here is, why did I choose Berlin for the company building concept? The easiest answer would be because everybody's in Berlin. The longer answer would be we had three places which we discussed: Munich, Hamburg, or Berlin. Hamburg because it's really logistics related. Munich because also it has a strong startup environment. But as we thought, and I still believe, Berlin is the place to be, because if you're looking for specific founder types, and if you want to share B2B problems, you need to have a profound pool of talents. I give you an example. Only this year, we did 450 founder interviews. And these are 150 founders. We started 30 validations with 61 founders or validators. And out of this 61 validators, we hired or we launched 4 startups with 14 people. So this is the funnel. So 14 out of 400. And the more people you interview, the more people you have, the more outreach I still believe it's the hotspot within Germany to find this kind of people you need for tackling potential challenging things. And an interesting aspect is actually only a minority of them is somehow experienced in intralogistics. Some never had worked in intralogistics, and they might even don't have a clue. However, they know how to build software startups. They know how to build a platform. They know how to do performance marketing and these kind of things. And this is something we should merge with the core competence we have within BEUMER Group. Another question. What experience report will we hear from you at PowerTech 2030, so in 10 years from now? So ideally, in 10 years from now, we would have launched 24 startups, and ideally more than half of them is still alive. So I'm realistic. Of course, we also will launch things which won't make it, but hopefully more than half of it will still be alive, and some of them hopefully really will be successful. In 2030, I hope that my job doesn't exist anymore, because digital transformation somehow is succeeded and becomes normality. There's no need for a specific org chart or a specific team which is trying to emphasize the need of this, because everybody realized and totally accept that we really need to drive this, and it's part of the core DNA, how mechanical engineering is nowadays. And simply it's the next add-on would be some kind of digital footprint, which will BEUMER Group then also be, which will shape BEUMER Group in the future. So actually to disrupt my own job in the end of the day.
So now there is Dieter Hattig writing something. Great answer. So if there are no more
I just
questions.
read it out loud. If there are no more questions, yeah, thank you very much. Sorry that the tone doesn't work, but I think we worked out. I hope you could understand me, and yeah, it's a bit fuzzy to talk to myself without any feedback, but this is also what comes along with Corona. And hopefully next time physically we all heard some good news, or hopefully good news the last day. So next time I rather meet you physically. So looking forward to meet you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hear you soon. Bye bye.